Everybody, welcome back to the Beyond the Peloton podcast. I'm Spencer Martin, author of the Beyond the Peloton newsletter, not host. Like I said last week, I'm here with Andrew Vontz from Choose the Hard Way podcast and newsletter. Has a Substack now. He'll tell you about it. We are talking about the flurry of racing action over the course of the last week. Paris-Nice, Tirreno-Adriatico. What we expect over the weekend. Is Matteo Jorgenson going to win Paris-Nice again? But Andrew, do you want to share your big news? Are you ready to share your big news about? We'll edit this out if you can't, but there's something coming in the mail for you.
Oh, I can't. We're going to hold that for next week.
Okay.
I do have some extremely big news about my efforts to be in the world tour, probably targeting 2026 now. And we are working hard on this to get Spencer out there on the Katy Trail on April 16th. I've secretly reached out to your wife and your children, so we'll perhaps be talking about that as well. They want a dad that they can be proud of, is what they've communicated to me, and they know what kind of work you're going to have to put in to make that happen. Next week, I have got Chase Work coming on the Choose the Hard Way podcast. If you don't follow me, you can go to @HardWayPod to find links to the Choose the Hard Way podcast on every platform. And the number one way you can support my human-generated content and the hot takes that I bring to you here on Beyond the Peloton is to subscribe to alwaysthehardway.substack.com. And please become a subscriber. Support human-generated content about bikes and life. I would appreciate it. All right, Spencer, let's talk about bicycle racing and what's going on with Jonas's hand. Do you think there's some correlation with this special helmet?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, okay, let's give people background. I'm reading right now. Jonas Vingegaard did not start today's Paris-Nice. So he's out of Paris-Nice, crashed yesterday, maybe broke his hand. Where did that actually, because did you read someone said he might have broken his hand. The team didn't say anything about it. Jonas didn't say anything about it. They called it like a contusion, a hand contusion. So unclear what the status of the hand is, if it's broken, if it's not broken. Also, he was wearing a very red helmet that they've sold special ad space for. It's like a Danish building supply company. Talk about
the first thing I think of when
way. Yeah.
First thing I think of when I see that red helmet, Danish building supplies.
When I'm building like a business park, I'm definitely going to remember that and buy that product. And F1 clearly has nothing on pro cycling. Okay, they got the glitz, the glamour. We have the Danish building supply companies. It's a little, you ever wonder about the structure of these deals? They clearly wanted to sponsor the most famous cyclist from their country, probably the most famous athlete at the moment. And they have to go to the team and give the team a taste, but only Jonas gets to wear the helmet. Kind of an interesting way to do it. I mean, I guess technically Red Bull is a sponsor of Ineos, but only Tom Pidcock gets to wear the helmet, and he's the one with the personal deal. I'd like to know more about how that works, but he's hurt his hand. And I would say more concerningly, Andrew, didn't look that good before he hurt his hand. He got dropped by Joao Almeida. He's done 2 uphill finishes this year. Dropped by Joao Almeida on both of them. That's not great. And maybe this is something, maybe it's not. But the time trial he won the overall with the Tour of Algarve. He was beating his splits on the climb. Not good compared to Almeida and Roglic and all the other GC guys. Maybe that's because he emptied the tank on the flat before. But the body of evidence we have from Jonas Vingegaard this year, not great. Especially when you consider how good Pogačar looks. We're talking about some guy trying to beat Pogačar's teammate who's not nearly good as Pogačar, while Pogačar is backflipping his way out of ditches to victories whenever he wants. So I would say the counter right now, the Tour counter, probably is in Pogačar's favor, if I had to guess.
Funny enough, Spencer, a topic that we've talked about a lot here on Beyond the Peloton is crashing, and my theory that the ground is undefeated in the history of bicycle racing. I did just write about it this week over at alwaysthehardway.substack.com. Go check it out if you'd like to hear my take. And I wrote about the Pog wreck. Something that I did not write about in this piece that I thought about in light of this Jonas incident and the discussion of his hand. And when we talk about Jonas's hand, I'm thinking about a mummified hand found in Tutankhamun's tomb, right? It's some kind of cursed hand at this point. The reports from Matteo Jorgenson following the stage were that during the race, Jonas was having difficulty braking and shifting. Spencer, I don't know if you've been on a bicycle going up or down a hill. These are pretty critical functions for your hand to fulfill.
Why would he stay in the race? That's what I don't
Well,
fully.
yeah, and then here's the other thing that Matteo shared was that Jonas had been dizzy during the race as well. I know Benji and Patrick talked about this over on their podcast yesterday. I do think it's highly concerning that we're taking concussed athletes and then putting them back out there to to ride bicycles down mountains. I don't think it's a great idea. And even the Pog wreck, Pog did go on to win the race, and I guess he was all right. There was no concussion protocol. And I went back and watched the tape a number of times. He hit his head extremely hard, at least twice. I'm talking like tomahawked his head into the ground on the initial wreck. And then when he was tumbling like a rag doll across the Tuscan veldt, slammed his head into the ground a few more times. I'm laughing, but it's not funny. I mean, he looked like character in a Roadrunner cartoon as he was flying across the road. Now we have Jonas doing something seemingly similar. And in addition to that, on those silly like 150 millimeter cranks, like I could barely tell he was pedaling.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not saying he's crashing because of the cranks, but like the climbing, like, are cranks long for a reason? Is now what I'm wondering. Like, have we gone too far? For this guy was like one of the best climbers ever, and now he's on 150 cranks and he can't climb. I wonder what's going on there. But Pogacar's win almost complicates the issue because he crashes, he doesn't get stopped, he wins. So it's now hard to like go pull someone out of a race after they crash, because what if they were going to go on to win and be quote unquote fine? The gold standard for this, or I guess the opposite, the shit standard for this is, do you remember Tom Squeen's Tour of California? I believe it was like,
oh yeah.
Yeah. So this is like the scariest thing I've ever seen. This guy crashes off the front, insists, gets up. He is not fine. Insists he's fine. He's like walking around the road, like laughing, like that's how gone he is. But then the Peloton's coming and you're just like, oh my God, he's standing in the road. The Peloton's coming. And they like don't hit him. You like can't believe they're coming around him. And then he insists on getting back on the bike and he's fallen over. But I just couldn't believe no one stopped him. So if that's, you would see that and say, hey, Toms, you got to stop. You can't keep racing. But then you have Pogacar on the other end of the spectrum and he seemed fine. So are you going to stop him? It's a tough question. I mean, yeah, it's a little funny. I mean, it just shows you, I guess, how big of a competitor these guys are. Like Paris-Nice, we didn't mention, it's been like snowing the whole time. Terrible weather.
Right.
Freezing cold. You'd imagine if you crashed there, you'd say, maybe I just go home. This kind of stinks, but I guess that's not how Jonas thinks.
Yeah, watching Paris-Nice this week and then thinking about the incidents we've had earlier this year with just cars just driving into the middle of races. I know that's the spirit of gravel, as we've discussed previously. It's typically not the spirit of high-level professional road racing. It just kind of feels like we're almost reaching a singularity in professional road cycling. And I'm wondering at this point, can we even call it professional cycling? And is it time for some seriously big money to come in and nerf this sport a bit more a la F1, so that when you go into the wall and explode into a ball of flames, 9 times out of 10, you're going to get hosed down and get out of the car alive? Do we need some better, just basic safety measures in professional cycling?
Well, what would you do to protect them from the weather?
Spencer, that's a loaded question.
Well, I mean, on the cars,
have you read about some of the cloud seeding programs? Surely we could blow some of these clouds.
Vail could make it snow on them, I guess. They could just, we could make it
snowy. Okay. Yeah, this is a bit of a red herring. The climate obviously is beyond the control of the race organizers. Things like having riders have active cars driving onto the course that are not part of the race caravan is something that's preventable. In addition to that, given that the climate does seem, I don't know, I've noticed it does seem to have changed in like a somewhat radical manner in many parts of the world. I think that, no, you can't change the weather in the moment. And if you can, please DM me at HardwayPod and we can talk about productizing
Yeah, I was
whatever you're
gonna
doing to
say, yeah,
control the
probably
weather.
pretty good business right there. Wow.
Yeah, I do think at this point, this is where we have a rock and a hard place. We have the tradition of cycling, the traditional cycling calendar, which we talked about last week when we talked about what does this potentially look like in the future? Do you see the Tour de France getting run versus the Giro, for example, in the same month potentially? Could we look at rearranging the calendar and doing something more sensible in the light of weather patterns? Like I don't know what's going to happen, but I know the weather's looking even worse for the remainder of Paris-Nice, right? So I don't know if you have like a foot and a half of snow predicted for a mountaintop finish, and that continues to happen for several seasons. Maybe it's time to look at some alternate routes, or as we've discussed previously, like move more in the direction of circuit style racing. Like, is the end result, do we end up in Dominguez Hills just having the CBR Criterium series with World Tour riders? I don't think that's probably the answer. There is some happy medium in here though.
I mean,
Mountains are a complicating factor because I believe they are foundational and critical to the sport. Even though, as you know, Spencer, I tend to take a Dodge 2500 down the mountain myself.
that could be what's happening. Well, I mean, you joke about that. They did like cancel 2 climbs on today's Paris-Nice stage because they drove everyone down in a Dodge Ram. But I mean, if you want to go into the mountains, if you want to go down mountains in March, I mean, you're kind of always like, I live in the mountains. Newsflash, it snows until like early June. So you're kind of always playing with fire. I guess the race could just be called Nice. Get Paris out of there, and it's just in the south of France. That would solve a lot of the problems. But here's my question: was this always happening? We just didn't see it because races weren't on TV until like very recently, like especially with the cars on the course. Like that could have happened in 1995, and we just wouldn't have seen it.
So you think we should have potentially the dichotomy here is Nice and Nice versus snowflakes and snowflakes?
Well, it is funny. It's like the race of the sun. We're gonna, and it's like this is the tradition. Like we're gonna suffer through like 6 days of terrible weather, and then 3 days of nice racing. It's like, well, maybe we should just do the race where it's nice. Why are we doing this? But it's tradition, Andrew. So we love it.
Yeah, I don't know. Going back to the professionalism aspect of this stage, Spencer, it's escaping me. Was it Wednesday's stage where they had the start, restart?
Yeah, that was crazy.
Start, restart, start. Yeah.
Well, yeah, start, stop, restart. Not a real restart. People were confused.
Right.
Stop again. This is like an hour and a half later, and then restart again.
Yeah. So I think things like that, I mean, you would see something like that at your regional gravel event. It's whatever. Like, hey, we've got, actually they're going to be dumping fresh gravel onto this road. We've got a road crew here. Everybody hold up and get in your spandex coveralls, and we're going to roast marshmallows, and then we'll wait, and then we'll restart the race. When you take a look at an event like this, given that, yeah, we are going to have these weather events, it's going to snow, it's going to sleet, we potentially are going to have hail, it could be a thunderstorm, whatever the case may be, at least having better communication with riders about what is going to happen when this goes down, given it's predictable that you're going to run into incidents like this now and in the future. And listening to Matteo Jorgenson talk about what happened in his experience of it, which is the Peloton was stopped. There wasn't a high degree of communication with riders. Then he said the red lead race vehicle went by, and he's just like started going full gas because apparently they're like, okay, the race is restarted. So he said he went from being freezing cold, hypothermic, to pinning it for 10 kilometers, and then the vehicle stopped again. Then they were stopped for quite a while, and then they started again. I'm going to be writing about this on my Substack. I had, like you, Spencer, I can't, I know we have some listeners who are able to do 6 to 10 hour training rides for gravel events, which is super cool. Maybe one day I'll be on that level. I often have to split my training into smaller chunks. So it might be like, I don't know, yesterday I did an hour, and then I think an hour and 5 minutes. Then I had to do 25 minutes in a separate trainer session. I've started to notice some pretty wild things about what happens to your body when you stop and then restart and do another session, maybe an hour or 90 minutes later. I'm finding it's very difficult to fuel appropriately and not induce a massive bonk. So I think it's putting these professional athletes. I'm going to look into the research behind this. And I'm very curious about the impact of going from full gas to hypothermia and then back to full gas again. I think it probably does some pretty wild things that would be difficult to train for. And that, while it is weather related, I just think this could be handled a heck of a
How
lot
would you
better.
handle that differently?
How would I handle it differently?
Other than like communicating the stop better?
Yeah, I would communicate the stop better. I also think you
A bunch of
should.
people who don't speak the same language. I feel like that doesn't get talked about enough. You're in a foreign country. So if you speak English, not an English speaking race, there might be other riders there who don't speak English or the language of the race. So that's complicated in itself.
Yeah, I would professionalize the sport and I would distribute information in every language that people needed it seamlessly, immediately. And I would have some kind of protocol. In addition to that, if there were likely to be a weather event, I would make it clear ahead of time. This is exactly what's going to happen. And this would probably be difficult to do, but if it were possible to have some kind of warming area, like I don't know what you would do. Maybe you have a semi truck that's heated and people can get into it to warm up until they have to get back on the bike. I don't know. Have easy ups. There's got to be some kind of
Well, that's
solution to
really
this.
the only solution because I'm actually surprised they stop. I mean, they also stop. The race isn't stopping the race. What happens is riders go up and a few riders say they want to stop. That's controversial too. Because what if you're at like Team Sky and they were just uncorking an attack and then it's like,
It's a
oh, we're
bias
stopping.
false. Yeah.
We're stopping. And then it's like, well, I don't want to stop. And then everyone argues and they stop. Stopping is like the worst thing you can do because then you're stuck out in the middle of nowhere. It's cold
Yeah.
and you're not moving. So, okay, why did we stop? I mean, obviously you can neutralize it, but you need like a structure that people can go into because I don't think viewers fully understand. Like, you're in the middle of the woods and it is 5 degrees Celsius and raining and hailing. Where are you going to go? So, they would need like a follow warming vehicle, I guess. I mean, here's my next question before we get into the racing. So we think MBS is the man to do this, to like provide a nice little warming truck. That's where I just like can't move. I can't get on board really with like, how would this be better under a Saudi funded breakaway league?
Let's set aside who the funder is. I think if you had the capital, I think the talent is out there to solve these problems.
Why
I
would you
mean,
solve this
like,
problem? I guess is my question. Why is this a
who
problem
is,
that needs to be solved?
where do you have an abundance of underemployed experts in disaster management?
I'm not going to answer that, but but I guess there's no
there might
incentive.
be some
to solve it.
experts who are looking for employment who could step in here.
I don't think cycling sees it as anything. I don't think they see anything wrong because they can do whatever they want. Like if you're ASO, it's like, why would you care? Like, what's the incentive to make anything better? Because everyone's going to show up at your race and do your race.
Yeah, because you're happy enough with the level of profit that you're making and you can go back to the chateau or whatever. I just feel like if we further professionalize the sport, there's more upside, there's potentially more on the line. You can't just stop this thing for 2 hours and cut, I don't know, a curling match, like whatever the case may be. People are paying big bucks for these streams now. I'm getting a stream of people just on the side of the road with their hands on motorcycle mufflers. Like, what is this?
I can't believe I was shocked they stopped. I mean, I can understand not wanting to race, but when you're riding and you're cold, what's the one thing you don't want to do? Stop.
You don't want to
riding.
stop. You don't want to stop. And hey, yeah, by the way, put on a little weight, guys. I can get out there and be.
This is a real thing, by the way. People are like 20 kilos lighter than they were on average 20 years ago. And they definitely can't handle the cold because they have no body fat. You remember Skelmoza it was Fleshwell last year where he was like convulsing because he has no body fat whatsoever.
Yeah. I did. One of the things I thought about during the stoppage is I did think about all of the training YouTube footage I watched this winter of like the Norwegian method, and specifically of some of the Uno X riders just out riding, in sub-zero Fahrenheit weather. And I thought, who's not cold? I don't think those guys are probably cold.
Well, when this happened, one guy attacked off the front after the restart. He was the only person in the race from north of the Arctic Circle. But here's what's interesting. He was bundled up more than everybody else. Like,
Right.
is there almost like a fetishization of like underdressing in pro cycling? Like, I don't know. You like ever since the loop, I'm like, why is everyone just
Right.
in leg
Yeah.
warmers? Because keeping your legs warm seems kind of important.
Yeah. Yeah. It does seem like it's important. I do think there's a big psychological component of that. I don't know what advice you got during your professional cycling career. And you certainly did not need leg warmers at events like Tulsa Tough, where you were bringing out your massive biceps and riding to near victory in the pro field. But, the advice that I got from my coach, David Brenton, who was awesome, Olympian, Masters world champion, great guy, former stuntman, the master of technique. He always said, hey, if it's under 65 degrees, cover your knees. So like, that's what I always did. If you watch, and it's funny because if you watch pro riders in training, if it's like under 75
Oh,
degrees, they're in
they
long
are
sleeves. They've got leg warmers
Arctic,
on. That's how
yeah.
you can tell. You go out on, again, I know I talk about the bus stop ride, and also now we've got the Taco Tuesday ride stepping up to compete with the bus stop. But in SoCal, man, it's under 70 degrees. Like, you'd have Tony Cruz from Postal show up. He's in like a thermal long sleeve. He's got leg warmers on, shoe covers, like everything, man.
It's funny. Yeah, I remember when I first moved to Boulder, the UHC guys in Blanco, if you remember Blanco, which is now Visma,
Yeah.
would be on the bus stop ride, and it'd be like 65 degrees, and they'd have like muffs on, like covering their face. Like, I was like, what is going on here? But that is the pro move. If you want to be pro, you got to bundle up. And and then racing comes around. It's like, no, you got to take all that off and be freezing cold. It's like,
Yeah.
might help to be warm. I've completely lost my train of thought. But here's my question to you, not related
Yeah.
the professionalization of pro cycling. Matteo
Let's talk
Jorgenson,
about it.
Visma,
Right.
I think he's going to win this race, Paris-Nice, for the second year in a row. That's a big deal. The guy looks really, really strong. Stage 4, kind of weird. Like, what is going on? So if you're Jonas Vingegaard, for people that didn't watch this, they get to the final climb. This is after all the stops. Everyone's cold. And even with that, you might just be like, kind of a weird day. Maybe I just like help my team. Let's just get to the finish line. And I'm not going to like put my teammate who's also leading the race under undue pressure. Now, Jonas attacks, doesn't really like get away, but then Matteo is isolated. And this is what I don't like. Jonas does this a lot. He did this at the Vuelta multiple times when Sepp Kuss was in the lead. It puts them in a really, really uncomfortable position because they're the race leader. Someone attacked them. They should be able to chase that down. They can't chase it down because it looks bad. For some reason, it doesn't look bad when Jonas attacks his own teammate who's in the race lead. But it's basically like punching someone with their hands tied behind their back because they can't chase you down and you get to take free time on them. In this case, he got mowed down by Joao Almeida. Holy smokes.
Wow.
And Matteo kind of like lost a few seconds. Probably won't matter in the grand scheme of things because Matteo dropped Jonas the next day and now is 22 seconds ahead of him, but he's out of the race. So he's 36 seconds ahead of Florian Lipowitz in second, and then Almeida's 40 seconds back. So it will probably work out fine. But I was a little surprised, especially for someone. Wouldn't you want to do everything you could to get your teammates on your side before the tour, or are we just Lance pilled? Like, did Lance come along and do this at like the Tour of Georgia, like work for the teammates and then expect them to work for him? Is that gone? Like, now the team leader just gets to win everything?
Yeah, I found this dynamic to be fascinating as well, and I went deep to try to get to the bottom of it, Spencer. So I watched the Matteo interview following stage, what was it? So that was stage 4 we're talking about, where Joao Almeida came over the top of Jonas like Stallone and absolutely destroyed him, made him look like he was pedaling a tricycle.
Not dropped the next day in true Joao fashion.
That's you gotta love Joao, right?
What is going on?
Yeah, I mean, I had this moment of like, wow, what are we going to see from Joao this year? This is impressive. And like, then sure enough, watching the interview prior to that stage, they had an interview with Matteo where he was with the entire Visma squad. Jonas was sitting next to him, and I was just watching Jonas's face, and he had the look to me of someone who felt like I should be getting interviewed. That's that was my read of it. I mean, I think the guy. I mean, you can't take the dog out of the fight, man. This is a guy who loves to win, and he's emo. He's it's he wants this extremely bad, and I think it pains him to do what he needs to do for the team, which is to cultivate this relationship with Matteo. Even, I mean, I get the sense like they probably get along. I don't think there's some big discord or strife between these guys, but I don't think this is what Jonas wants. And then when this move went on stage 4, I agree with you. It seemed pretty bizarre. At the same time, listening to the post-stage interviews, Matteo said, I was totally frozen. I had no ability to go at the move. And, you could make the like, well, Jonas is just covering the attack, but like to what end? Joao's not going to win this race overall. So like, whatever, just let the guy go or let
But if we
Matteo
were
go after him.
teammates and I was in the race lead and I said, "Hey Andrew, I'm like fucked here."
Yeah,
I would hope that you wouldn't then attack. I'd be like, "What? Why did you just do that?"
Yeah. Yeah, completely. Right. I would say, hey, can you help me? And I'll
Like maybe
pace off
ride a
your
nice
wheel.
steady pace on the front. Like, because there was many times where Chris Froome was
Yeah.
on, and his team would just ride a steady pace in the front, and it would fool everyone
Yeah.
into thinking he was fine. But I mean, he's just a competitor, I guess is the easy answer. But here's where it gets awkward. Unlike the Lance situation we're describing, Matteo right now is stronger than Jonas Vingegaard. And like if you
Yeah.
watched it, he didn't get results at opening weekend. The guy was flying. Strongest guy on his Visma team. I think stronger than Wout at opening
Yeah.
weekend. Comes into Paris-Nice, looks unshakable, except for when he froze and lost a few seconds on stage 4. It could be a little awkward. Like, I don't know. It could be harder to just like, I'm going to work for this guy when you in his mind, Jonas is probably thinking like, I want to prove that I'm better than him. So he's not the new team leader, even though that's not going to happen.
Right.
You can think weird things at times, but it is complicated by how good he is.
Yeah. That's an interesting read. I think Matteo is brilliant at showing up, and when he has the opportunity, showing just how good he is, which then gives him more opportunities. And it definitely benefits him now, however he might feel, to be as gracious as possible, knowing that the entire team is built around Jonas at the tour. And I don't know, like Jonas hits the ground. We don't know what the extent of the hand injury is yet, but like, let's say it's a broken wrist, broken hand, or like, man, like we're barely into the season. We're a few months out from the tour, and we already have had both of the main animators like hit the ground in a pretty serious way within the span of 1 week. It's going to happen again sometime between now and the tour, unfortunately. And if it happens, Matteo is potentially waiting in the wings. Like, what do you think? If he gets his shot, how does he do against Pog?
He gets crushed. But that's assuming Pog does not. I mean, yeah, that showed it. Like Strade Bianche showed. I guess we haven't talked about that race since it happened.
We do need to talk about it, and we need to. There's a specific thing I want to talk about with that race, which is the injured reserve list following the race, and whether that's, to your point, hey, has this just been happening forever, or are pros, even though they love that race, being put in an abnormally dangerous position? The injuries coming out of that, it was comical. It was.
Yeah, I was thinking. Yeah, well, just let me finish that. If
go
Pogačar,
ahead.
Him crashing at Strade like shows us the blueprint for Matteo winning the tour, because you're right. Like both these guys have crashed already. Like it could happen again. The Jonas one is interesting to me because everyone always gets their panties in a bunch about Pogačar doing Roubaix. It's too dangerous. It's like, well, it's more dangerous than Roubaix, Strade Bianche, and where Jonas always crashes, like crappy early season stage races. Doesn't seem like anywhere safe. So
yeah,
I don't know if you're less likely to crash. Also, Paris-Nice is 8 days long. Like I don't think Pogačar is doing a stage race until the Dauphiné. So you're actually reducing your chances of crashing because it's just fewer days on the road, fewer chances to crash. Yeah, so
Yeah.
Matteo would need like some serious injuries to happen to Pogacar and Vingegaard to win the Tour. But yeah, I don't know. The wrist thing is complicated. Hand, wrist, and we don't know if it's broken. If it's broken for Vingegaard, like that, Vingegaard, I keep switching it up. If it's broken for Jonas, like that's not the easiest recovery. I mean, that's what screwed Pogacar up a few years ago.
Yes. Right.
Whatever we know, it's not good. This is not what he needs when he's trying to beat the best cyclists of all time. On Strade Bianche, yeah. So if you didn't watch it, Pogacar crushed it. Won. Didn't drop. I'd say the big headline, didn't drop Pidcock on the first attack. Only had to ride off the road at full speed and then attack again and drop him. Probably in a more appropriate attacking position, like 18K from the finish as opposed to 80K from the finish. Pidcock looked pretty good. I was impressed by him. And then he's also looking good. I'm watching him right now at Tirreno. He's been at the front and present in a way I did not see at Ineos on his Q36.5 team at Tirreno-Adriatico. But yeah, a lot of crashes. We didn't see them because the race only starts, the television starts like really late, so you miss a lot of it. They have made the course harder in the last 2 years, and it does seem like there's more crashes after that. Because I think what we don't see is there's lots of gravel climbs and gravel descents, and they're doing this on like 30 mil road tires. They're not doing it on a 45 mil gravel tire. And then someone in the Peloton, maybe they should remain anonymous, said you'd be shocked at how bad a lot of these guys are on gravel because a lot of them never ride it. Like someone told me, like a World Tour pro, they hadn't ridden gravel in like years before racing Strade Bianche. So if you're not used to riding on gravel and then you go do a race on it and it's been made harder with a lot more gravel descents, probably is pretty dangerous. And everyone's trying to stay at the front because they think Pogacar might attack from like 100K out. So it's more probably nervous than it was in years past.
Spencer, let me ask you this. Who is great at riding on gravel and has a high degree of control over their bike?
I'm like a mountain biker, perhaps.
I think the answer is actually no one.
Nobody. Yeah,
I don't think.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So it's been interesting. As you know, I've had many of the top protagonists in professional American gravel racing on Choose the Hard Way, including Dylan Johnson, Mr. 2.2 Race Kings. I've had Keegan Swenson on. I've had Alexei Vermeulen, many other gravel pros. And when I've talked to them on the show and privately about this, like, hey, like, how do you handle loose over hard pack, which is the most common surface scenario you get in gravel? And like, that's what you see at Strade Bianche. It's like, well, like you can't really, you're just, you're just kind of drifting. Like, honestly, like remember at BWR Kansas, which of the gravel events that we have done here in the Beyond the Pelotoniverse, it was relatively straightforward. There were some sections of deep, freshly poured gravel, but it's like rolling hills, some high speed downhills. We were probably going like 45.
But we weren't going of the Midwest, you'd say.
Yeah, like rolling. Seriously, like we weren't going down mountains, but there were hills where you could get a substantial amount of speed, and you're hitting a lot of corners on that course, both on the downhills and some of the flat corners where I remember talking to you about this after the race, where if you did what you would normally do on the road, which is go start your turn wide, go to the inside, right, to the apex of the turn, and then go back out, you're riding into loose gravel and like potentially wrecking. It's it's not the right strategy. You can't corner at all like you do on the road. And then even then, you just don't know. You could be on like the hardest hard pack gravel that's almost like riding on asphalt. You just don't know that day where the kitty litter of marbles are going to be strewn across the course. And I mean, I don't know. Is that more dangerous than riding in a bunch of road furniture kind of vomited all over the
apparently it is
a city center?
Because there was a lot of crashes. Yeah.
Man, there were a lot of crashes. So the injured reserve list coming out of this was bananas. I don't know if you caught this, but former Strade champion Kwiatkowski crashed out on the same corner as Pog.
I did not see that.
Yeah. And then there was Jared Gruber of Gruber Images. Jared and Ashley, absolute legends, two of the best shooters in the pro cycling photo game. Jared wrote about something he saw following the race, that he saw a rider get off his bike and run backwards to check on one of his teammates who was unconscious on the side of the road. It was Alberto Bettiol did that. So, I mean, there's some heavy, heavy crashes going down out there, kind of similar to what I see at every gravel event that I compete in.
Cancel Strada. I can actually go with you on this ride. Get this race off the calendar. Everyone loves it. It's like 19 years old. It's too new. It's too big for its britches. Get it out of here. Should people be riding gravel tires on it? That's what I always wonder. Like, why are we doing 30 mil road tires?
Well,
it's gravel race.
That's an interesting question. I don't know if you caught this, but I think the most interesting psyop coming out of Strade was actually from UAE management, who were using the press to make numerous statements about this is why Pog should not be racing Paris-Roubaix. So I think there's actually like an intense debate going on inside the team, because I think, he's very much of the mind of, hey, this is a flesh wound, like, put me back on the bike. Yeah, of course we're going to race Paris-Roubaix. Like, I want this in my Palmares. And I think they're like, oh, no. Like, we need you. We actually need you at the tour. We can't have you, cartwheeling down the Ehrenberg Forest cobbles.
It's funny to me. I was saving this for my other show today, but it's funny to me that this is causing that conversation to happen. It's like, he shouldn't have to crash for you to realize that he could crash at these races. Like, it's very outcome based versus just like, hey, Strada's pretty dangerous. Maybe we shouldn't do it. Maybe it's not been that dangerous in the past, though. Maybe this is new. Is he going to do, do you think he's going to do Roubaix? I think this is like one of the more interesting questions, because no one has any freaking idea if he's going to do it or not.
I think he's going to do Roubaix.
I think so too, and I think the team doesn't want him to.
Oh, they absolutely don't want him to. That's why the DS or whatever team owner is all over cycling media talking about, like, yeah, we don't think this is such a great idea. Look at what can happen. To put myself in the Spencer side of the conversation for a moment, cycling's an inherently dangerous sport. So if you don't want your riders to be injured, don't put them in races and just show up at the tour.
Vanderpool it, baby.
Yeah. I gotta hold on, Spencer. I was thinking about Milan San Remo coming up on, I believe, the 22nd.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's blowing my mind that Philipsen won last year. I had to go double check. I had to triple check. I kept going back. I was like, did he really win this race? And we think, it's funny, like, you look at Strade and it's like, oh, Pog's unstoppable, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, guess who couldn't come up with the correct strategy to nuke everyone and win last year? It was Pog.
Well, that's the course. But if, let's say you filter out Sanremo, the last 2.5 years of one-day races have been won by solo attacks by 3 different riders. So 3 riders basically win every one-day race. It's Vanderpool, Remco, and Pogacar. But that's why it's funny. Okay, this is good. Let's go on this ride. Sanremo was long considered the worst monument. And it is, there's a lot of additions where you have like Sanremo-itis. It's like, what? Oscar Freire won 3 times? Like, how did that happen? Like, Philipsen won? But because it's such a strange race and it's boring, right? It's like 7.5 hours long. Nothing happens until the end. But it's like it's great for the TikTok generation. It's like, when do you turn it on? You turn it on at the end. And that's when the action's going to be happening. And because the race is so easy, it's actually perfect for modern cycling, where these guys are so good. Like, the best guys are so much better than everybody else. It levels the playing field, because Pogacar can't just ride away. He actually has to use tactics and think, and like, maybe I should. Larry Warba said this. I'm stealing it from him. I think it's not a bad idea. Pogacar should do nothing at Sanremo. Just sit in and go for the sprint. See if you can win the sprint. And maybe you can, but it's his view that attacking is a trap on these climbs, because they're too fast. Like, they're going up some of these climbs at like 25 miles an hour. How could you get any distance on anyone at that speed? So I think Sanremo, like, the times have come around, and it's now like the most interesting monument because it's happening on the 22nd. We don't really know. Philipsen could win again. I was thinking, I don't know if you watched Tirreno yesterday, super weird race. just Italy has a lot of mountains that you don't even know about. Like they're nowhere near the Alps. They're in the middle part of the country, and they go up into like an alpine plateau. It looked like they were in Colorado. The race breaks up. I don't know how you feel about this. Team Sky attacks through the feed zone, putting it in the gutter through the feed zone. People were freaking out trying to get their musettes. And then hard race, like brutal race. Vanderpool's there, Pidcock's there. You know who wins that race? Olaf Koy wins that race. So you're thinking like, is Olaf Koy going to win San Remo? Like it's wide open. But I don't know if you noticed who's leading Tirreno-Adriatico, Mr. Filippo Ganna. He probably won't win the overall, but he looks pretty good for San Remo. Vanderpool's been here, has not looked that good, but this is the Vanderpool trap, right? This is what he always does. You're like, Vanderpool's not in shape. And then he's going to win San Remo and he's going to win a Flanders-Roubaix double. Tom Pidcock looks pretty good. But here's the big question I've been wondering. We've been debating in the house. Is Ganna lost his aura? Like, has Jonathan Milan stolen the aura that Ganna should have? Because he's doing well. He looks a little just like worn down. He just does not look like the Ganna I remember. There's no youthful sparkle. He's not that much older than Milan. Milan's like the hot new tall Italian rider though. And then Ganna's like, I just feel like he's struggling a little bit for identity. And I think it's the team's fault. If he was at a different team that wasn't Ineos, he wouldn't be so sad all the time.
It's funny. I was thinking about this while I was on the trainer watching the races this week. I had the same thought. Should Ganna have moved to another team this season now that we're seeing Ganna 3.0? And I mean, we'll never know the answer to this question. Going back to the point you made about somehow Milan-San Remo, formerly the most boring race, now delivers like really 20 minutes of the most exciting,
thrilling.
Right. I mean, right. Yeah. Like last year, and you see these, I think Ganna is a great example of, you see these types of moments that you just don't see anywhere else in the season last year you had Vanderpool, Ganna, Pog. It was like Clash of the Titans going up that climb. It was like, oh my God, Ganna's doing 7 watts per kilo at 195 pounds or whatever he weighed.
Yeah. Like
it was, it was nuts. So yeah, I'm not sure what happens now that we have climbing machine Ganna. I think it actually diminishes his chances, ironically, of winning this race. And orthogonal to Ganna, and you mentioned Milan, I'm like, what goes down between Mads Pedersen and Milan at Milan-San Remo? Like, I don't know if they're both going to be there, but if they are, we've seen Pedersen was 4th last year, and I feel like Milan is the new Ganna and absolutely could win this race in the right scenario. So is this going to be one of those, like, we'll let the road decide. We have 2 leaders. I mean, I thought Alpecin played that beautifully last year with Vanderpool and Philipsen, because it was the rope-a-dope. Nobody thought Philipsen was going to get the win. It's like, well, Vanderpool, he's the Galactico. And then you get that slingshot, because that's what Philipsen needs to win those sprints.
Well, yeah. I mean, and he needs the key to winning San Remo is getting 2 riders over the Poggio. And then the second key, which is where Little Trek could struggle, one of them has to work for the other one, because then you can reel in the attacks that are happening. I think it was someone from like Red Bull or something. It was off the front. Maybe it was Matteo Sobrero, perhaps. But then Vanderpool had to pull him back in. So yeah, Pedersen and Milan are both doing San Remo. Here's what's really interesting. Mads Pedersen not doing the Tour de France, because you know who's the sprinter at the Tour de France? Jonathan Milan.
Right.
Got flicked off his own tour team. Probably is a little bit of rivalry there. I mean, we saw some frustration from Pedersen in that recent interview. I was shocked. He was like naming names about people that have let him down in the lead-out train. I would maybe pinpoint that as something that is showing that he's not so happy with the situation inside the team. If they both get over the climb, the final climb, like, is one really going to work for the other? I mean, what you could do, I guess, is Milan. I don't think Milan is going to get over, because I think it's so positional and so skill-based. He's really only in like his 2nd or 3rd road season. I mean, from being a full-time track rider, I think it's not going to work out for him. But let's say they both get up and over. what did we see? What was it? Jasper Stuyven. We already played this out, right? It was Stuyven and Pedersen, and then Stuyven attacked right at the base of the descent of the Poggio, stayed away. I mean, that would be the Pedersen move. Like, I'm going to attack, you stay back and win the sprint if they catch me. Like that. It's probably how they should play it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such an unpredictable finish. That's why I love this race. And I agree with you. I'm really fascinated by what's going on inside of Little Trek right now. Suddenly in this position of having multiple cards to play, and there does seem to be a lot of strife within the team. I didn't go and take a look at this. I'm curious if you know, Spencer, the lead out man that Mads Pedersen dimed out. And to be clear, I think everything that Mads expressed, these are all conversations that are had on other team buses. They're happening on the team bus though.
Yeah,
They're not
exactly.
It's like, you know what I mean? Like if you're on any
shocked.
high performing team, like this is a completely appropriate conversation to have. And especially in the heat of the moment after completing the event, that's like not the time to go talk to a reporter or anyone about it. Just keep it to yourself, and then you can talk to people when you've cooled down. I was just curious, how long has that lead out man that he specifically dimed out been in his lead out train? I didn't recognize that rider's name. However, I'm not highly conversant in the
Do you
Trek
remember his
Littleverse.
name? Forgetting his name.
Yeah, other than Kenny, who I love. Like, where's Kenny? I haven't seen him that much this year from Little Trek.
Wait, Kenny.
There's a writer named Kenny on Little Trek, and I've never come across a pro cyclist from Europe named Kenny. So I find it to be fascinating.
Oh man, who is this? What was I just going to say? So, oh wait. So imagine this. Close your eyes and imagine this. Ghana's on Alpecin de Konik. Like, don't you think it's like he's just thriving there in my imagination? Like he's with the big plastics boys, doesn't have to worry about the angst of Ineos anymore. He's getting lunch. You know, they're not cutting lunches at Alpecin de Konik like they are at Ineos. And he just like needs to leave this like GC facade behind, in my opinion, and just go full in on the classics.
Yeah. Hey, Spencer, I'm sorry to have to inform you of this, but Kenny Ellison has retired from professional cycling.
Okay, I was just getting worried about this because
I don't see him on the. Did he go? Yeah, did he go into a ravine last year and I missed it? No, he's 33 years old. He's feeding croissants to his goats now, probably.
Retired on like a very healthy pension at 33.
Yeah,
he's going to be pulling that thing for the next 70 years. Kenny Ellison, yeah, man.
He was great, though. He was an incredible rider. He made some big moves. I love watching him race.
Second at a tour stage, 2021. I forgot he went to Trek Segafredo.
Okay, I've got the name of the teammate. It's coming up here if I don't get paywalled. All right. Oh, man. Keep going. I'm searching.
Okay. But yeah, I just
find this rider's name.
The facade needs to stop. And then two other things I have before I have to go.
Okay.
UAE's on the front right now at Tirreno. I think Juan Ayuso wins that race. I hope.
Yeah.
Because they've got problems if he doesn't. But are you...
what about... Let's just talk about Juan Ayuso for a second. Is your view of Juan Ayuso changed at all and how he fits into the UAE-verse? Or is this...
If anything, it's worse. I mean, he's very good, but that almost makes it harder to imagine him at that team. Like, what's the future? Like, I guess he's going to the Giro. If he wins the Giro, he's not going to want to go win the Giro again. He's going to want to win the Tour. So I just don't understand where that's going and how that's going to work. And he's not going to the Tour this year because that clearly didn't work that well last year. So what's the future of his career? I don't get it. I heard a rumor that him and Almeida were trying to get Pogačar pushed out of the team, and then I ran this by a director and they almost exploded. Their mind couldn't handle that idea. There's like, well, where do they think they're pushing him to? Like, how would that actually work? But I think he'll have to leave the team. I mean, we'll see what the Giro will be the big test. But just like, I'm continually shocked at how like good UAE can look. The best team in the world getting better. And when Pogačar's there, holy smokes, are they good. Like Tim Wellens leading out Pogačar's attack, getting back in the group and finishing third at Strada. Holy smokes. But then they just no-show. Like this team time trial at Paris-Nice, like what happened there? And then Almeida looking so good and then being unable to win stage races because he has no consistency whatsoever. Feels like they're all over the place. I just like don't fully understand what's happening with that team. As good as, I mean, obviously they're very good. And like when Pogacar's there, there's no problem. But
Right.
yeah. I mean, I guess maybe it's just a byproduct of like, hey, we're going to get all the best riders and then maybe they're not going to work that well together, but they'll be so much better than everyone else. It makes up for that.
Right. Okay. So speaking of which, I've found I've found who specifically mods dimed out. It's South African pro Ryan Gibbons. The quote is Ryan shows up way too late, and then I let him in. In the positioning battle, I lose them, but I also knew that the gap would open up on the left side at some point, so I could jump back onto their wheel. But they also lose each other. Then Ryan stops riding in the final, and that's a mistake for him to do that. So he's directly criticizing his lead out man in detail to the press. As I'm reading this and watch him running back the tape, I'm just thinking, man, this is stuff that happens in a sprint. And I don't know, Cavendish would get on another wheel and something would happen, but that's not the kind of finisher that Mads Pedersen is. So where did Ryan come from? Ryan is a he's a pro cyclist here on planet Earth, Spencer. Prior to being at Little Trek, he was at UAE.
The black hole that is the UAE sprint lead out that you'll never remember.
Yeah, so I'm guessing he's potentially new to working with mods, and these guys are early in their working relationship. We're, 2 months into the season. Mods, not a conversation to have off the team bus, pal.
Maybe for for Danish people, it's like, sometimes like Dutch people, I know those are different countries, but like Northern European directness, just like,
Sure.
What's happening right now? Why are you saying this? Maybe just think that's a normal thing. That's not even a criticism. I'm just stating facts here.
Yeah, potentially. I don't know.
But yeah, it is a little, maybe Gibbons like got Milana coffee or something and Mads is not too happy about it. Thinks that he's playing favorites. It is, he comes from this long, I don't know why this is, but it's like this long tradition of South African lead out riders. It's like, remember like Robbie Hunter? It's like all these South African runners are like, I guess too, if you're not part of the Schengen zone, you're like, I got to stay in this. I got to prove I'm worth this visa. So I'll be the lead out man.
Yeah, this is interesting. I can't remember the years that Cav was at Quebeca and Dimension Data. Ryan Gibbons was at Quebeca in 2013 and then Dimension Data 2016, 17, 18, 19.
So he was Cav's lead out man.
Right? Well, I don't remember the years Cav was there.
Those were some of the worst years of Cav's career. Like,
he gave him some of the worst lead outs.
Well, I'm not. I think like maybe.
Yeah, Cav wasn't finishing things off. Yeah, so he overlapped with Cav 16, 17, 18, 19. Yeah,
he did win a tour stage in 16, I guess. And Mark Renshaw was his lead out man. Interesting. Wow. We are officially lost in the sauce here. But that was a good team, better team than you remember.
Yeah,
Steve Cummings was on that team.
Wow,
Bernie Eisel, Jans van Rensburg.
Let's get this band back together for Unbound 2025, man. All right. Okay. I know you had one more thing you wanted to talk about. Another thing that's been on my mind is a lot of jibber jabber this week, Spencer, about whether Pog is on the same level as Pidcock as a descender. I have a take here. What's the Spencer take?
I would probably say, I don't know if this is a hot take, probably Pidcock is a better descender. Don't you?
How much better?
I mean, clearly not that much better because they were close to each other. I guess Pidcock didn't crash. So is that advantage Pidcock?
My take is I think that they're on the same level and that Pog just isn't going out and doing flashy things for social media.
Yes,
to show how good he is. I mean, you know what I mean? Like when I hear people talk about this, to me, it's got a bit of that, like, well, I could beat Quinn Simmons, if it were a Wednesday night in Tucson, and the sun was just right. I
You
think
can't handle the
I'd actually,
chicanes in the final corner. Yeah.
yeah, totally.
You
Like
can't do that. Well, I could
I
say
think,
stuff like that.
yeah, I think I'd actually have a shot at it. I saw a YouTube video of the shootout, and I think I could probably take him. It's like, yeah, I don't think that we're probably seeing full gas Pog, like what he can really do when he's letting it rip. He's not going out and making videos with Safa Bryant riding Tuna Canyon. You know why? Because he's smart and he saves it for when he's trying to do things like win the Tour de France.
Yeah, and he's training.
That's my take.
Like, I do think people underestimate Pidcock. Very famous. Yeah, like purposely famous for this. Does cool stuff. But like, think of the third guy in that group, keeping up with them on all these descents where they're flying, is Connor Swift. Do you even think of Connor Swift as a good bike handler? No, it's like just a pro that is unbelievably good and able to hang with them. Like, the level of all these guys is so high, like so high. And you're right, Pidcock probably is artificially, clearly a very good descender, but yeah. Pogačar also very good and can keep up with them.
Yeah, I'm just hearing a lot of like Godzilla versus Thor type conversations this week. The other thought that I had, are we going to see any World Tour pros make the Matej Mohoric mistake of ruining his entire 2024 season by going to Unbound? Do you think we'll ever see that happen again?
Did we heard? Oh man, I got to go. We got chaos going on upstairs, I can hear, but I don't think we've heard any big names going this year, right? I do think people are pretty freaked out by that because I think that set him back.
I think that's 100% what happened. I'm hoping to get him for an interview, and I'd like to hear the actual truth about this because I think it ruined his season.
It's not easy. It's not easy travel. I just think people like underestimate how far in the middle of nowhere it is. But I've got to let you run, Andrew, and thank you. And we will be back next week. Check out the Substack. Choose the hard at Hardway. What is
it's always thehardway.substack.com, or just search for Choose the Hardway, or go to @hardwaypod on Instagram, and you can find links to all this awesome stuff.
All right. And we will talk next week.